In this lesson, we'll learn about creating our fourth displacement map to fit the areas we need it in our image. Okay, so at this point we are kind of working on these areas up here, and maybe down here on this calf some and up here. So looking at this in detail, we've got a lot of disturbances here in the water, but up here it's just really not that apparent. So I want to come in and look for some more high frequency detail in another image that we have. So let me just jump over to my lesson 10 displacement file. Now you may have noticed over here that I've cleaned up our highlights and shadows that we worked on in the last lesson. I've got them in this highlights and shadows group, and I have a subgroup there with all the threshold layers in it. You may even notice a couple of extra ones here. Now, I use the exact same technique to create these two with this black and white layer of our legs, except before I use the threshold adjustment, I applied if we come down here to filter and render, I applied this difference clouds filter. And I'll just go ahead and select that legs layer and show you what that looks like really quickly here. So I applied this to it before I applied the threshold adjustment. I applied this once, and then I inverted this and applied the threshold adjustment, just so we could get a little bit different pattern here with these spec 3 and spec 4 layers. So you can see there's some really small specular places in there that I've got set up with those two layers. Now, at this point, let's jump over here and work on that displacement. So we'll go ahead and hide our displacement for 2 and 3. Let me make another group here and call it displacement 4. And at this point, I want to use another image here. So I've got this image here. Again, this is one of our stock exchange images that I grabbed. And I really like the high frequency detail that we see here with the bubbles. Maybe it's something we could do with that. So let me grab my crop tool and just drag out a crop area here so we're not working on the whole image. And I'll go ahead and hit enter to confirm that. And at this point, before I do anything, I want to get rid of these lines. We have a couple of horizontal lines and a couple of vertical lines here that I want to get rid of. And these are mainly because of, again, the glass container that this water is in. So I'm just going to, again, use my spot healing brush first. And we'll just go ahead and run down these really quickly, sort of like that. See if we can't get rid of those for the most part. You can see it's doing a pretty good job of taking those out, but it is blurring the pixels just a little bit. Now, coming in here and looking at these, I might come in and just run it along these strong horizontals as well, but a lot of this we're going to need to do with the patch tool. So I'm going to come in here. Let's see, that looks pretty good. I think I'm okay with that for now. Let's go ahead and grab our patch tool. Again, right underneath the the spot healing brush. So we'll go ahead and grab that and make sure it's set to content aware. And I want to use this on very loose because I want to kind of give a little bit more disbursement between this mass of bubbles. Separate those bubbles out a little bit. So maybe we could come in here and just lasso up some of these areas that are problems, and maybe come over and substitute those with some of these areas where the bubbles are a little looser. Something like that. Maybe come over here and grab those bubbles there. Now, I'm not going for perfect here. We're still going to level this pretty heavily just to look for contrast. But I'm coming in here and just kind of breaking those bubbles up just a little bit more. You can kind of see what the end goal is. You can see that because of the content aware, Photoshop's doing a really good job of just making sure that the bubbles are fitting into their new environment pretty seamlessly. Now, occasionally it has some issues and we get some blurry edges, but that's okay. All we need to do is lasso that up again and maybe drag it over to someplace different. Come down here with this one. So you can see I'm basically rebuilding this bubbly area. Getting rid of a lot of these big turbulent areas, replacing them with these more kind of haphazardly scattered bubbles. If we need to, come in and grab some of these kind of fuzzy areas and just switch those out. Totally up to you how far you want to take this. Not too critical to have everything perfect at this point because, again, this is all for our basically for our displacement. So let me come in and break up this big mass right here really quickly. Give it something like that, maybe. That's starting to look a little bit better. All right, we'll deselect that. So now we've got our bubbles scattered a little more consistently throughout that area. We have some area that we can use for our displacement. So let me go ahead and at this point, I'm going to desaturate this and then use my levels adjustment with the Control L. Really beef up these blacks. Maybe bring up the whites just a little bit as well. You can see here we're knocking out most of those middle values. If we need to, we can always kind of shift those with this center arrow. Something like that looks pretty good. All right, great. So we've got this done. So let's go ahead and just grab our move tool. We will drag this over to our displacement document. And let's go ahead and free transform that. We're going to need to mask this out as well. So let's jump down here maybe to displacement 2 and steal that mask there. I'm going to unlink that so we can move this image around. Now, these still have kind of a horizontal movement to them, and I want them to have more of a vertical movement. So I'm going to rotate this by free transforming it. Maybe to something like that. And I'm really only concerned with kind of this area here and maybe this area down here. So rather than, if I'm happy with kind of where I have that image positioned up here at the top, then why not maybe come in and just use our lasso tool to move some of these pixels around. We could always come back and get this image again if we need it, but maybe we come over and grab these pixels and just move them. Sort of like that. Now we may need to come in with our clone stamp and kind of fix this area right here. But I think that is looking pretty good for the most part. I think it'll fit the needs we have. So may come in here and let's just drag this up a little bit further. Okay, great. So let me come in and drag maybe another copy of this image over and drop it in. And let me modify this mask really quick. Get rid of this leg. Make sure my feather is turned off here. There we go. And we'll come in on this new layer and let's get another mask. Kind of like that. Modify that really quickly to get rid of the other leg. Unlink that. And now we can come in and transform this second copy of the image to fit the second leg here. So maybe we like kind of this texture up here. Something like that. And we could always come in with a big black brush if we wanted to. Maybe just kind of fill in this area down here. That looks good. All right, let me go ahead and save this out. I'll go ahead and save this as my lesson 11 displacement file. And let's bounce over here and go ahead and apply that. Now I'm going to kind of collapse that highlights and shadows group, and we'll go ahead and hide that for right now. And let's just merge a copy of this up so we can apply our filter. And let me make sure my settings are correct here. Still using that 500 value for both of those. And that's giving us some pretty good displacement there. Let me just drag this up. And obviously you can see here that it's covering up a lot of the areas that we don't want it to cover. So we'll need to come in obviously and modify this mask some. I'm going to grab that soft round brush again and just kind of begin masking this out. Now as I get up into here, I wanted to use my pressure sensitivity to begin doing that a little less. But you can see how we're bringing some of this additional displacement in. If we need to, we can always turn those shadows and highlights back on. Switch back over to white, and before I paint in white into this mask, I want to make sure I have a selection made like that, so I'm not painting white around the legs. And we'll come over here and mask out some of this. Just getting a little bit more of that visual, that noise in these areas where we wanted it. Now, if we really want to, these have a little bit of a crisp edge because we leveled them pretty heavily. We could always jump in here and maybe convert this to a smart object, and then come in and, after the fact, apply our Gaussian blur to it. Maybe something like that. Now again, this Gaussian blur has its own mask here, so we can hide that simply by painting into its mask. So maybe we want these to be a little more crisp down here. Make sure we paint with black. Maybe we want these up here to be a little bit more blurry. So we would have to beef up the Gaussian blur effect for that. So let's go ahead and blur those up a little bit more. Maybe something like that. All right, that's starting to look really good. We've got a lot of really nice noise going on inside our legs here that's really kind of giving the illusion that they are indeed made of water. So now there's a few little touch-ups that I would eventually like to make to this. One, I think that bringing some of these specular highlights and finding that detail in its displacement layer and creating those displacements that, or those specular highlights that match it, kind of like we've done here and here, but maybe for some of these things like these areas in here. Now, I did the masking initially before I created this smart object really quickly. So if I were to jump into this, I may want to clean this mask up just a little bit more, just so we can have a nice clean displacement being applied to our file here. I'll probably clean that up in between lessons some, but let me show you a trick here that you can use very similar to that threshold trick that we used to kind of call out some of those specular highlights. So we can find kind of the area that we like. We'll need to find the specular, or rather the displacement layer that it's on. Say we wanted to bring out, let's say we wanted to bring out, where is it? There it is. On displacement 2, this blob of area right here, and create a specular highlight for that. We'll just lasso that area up, copy it to a new layer, bring it up here just like so, and I tell you what, let's go ahead and desaturate that, level it. Maybe something like that. Create our layer underneath it, fill it with black, merge them together, jump over and control click on one of the channels, copy that to a new layer, and there we have it. So we've got our specular highlight. We can come in and apply our blend mode, maybe adjust the opacity on that, and then of course maybe come in and use our eraser to maybe feather some of these edges, make it a little more organic feeling. So we could do that really for any of the details in any of our displacement layers that we have created here. We could come in and essentially use those details, pop them out with a lasso selection, and using that threshold, or rather in this case just levels, we could come in and really turn that into a nice specular highlight. So I tell you what, I may go ahead and do that on a few areas in between lessons just to kind of pull out some of these details and add a little bit more of these bright areas into some of the areas that I feel like are needing it. But I don't want to spend much more time on the displacement. I want to go ahead and move on because we've got these solid masses of water that we've been working on, and if we want to really make this believable, In my mind, I think that if this runner's running and their legs are made out of water, then that water is going to be splashing out and away from the silhouette of the legs. So I want to go ahead and in the next lesson begin creating some splashes around the legs that are coming off of the silhouette.